In a far-away village, there was a small, quiet community where everyone knew everyone by name. Life was simple. Children ran barefoot through dusty paths. Mothers gathered by the stream to wash clothes, and old men sat under the big iroko tree, chatting and drinking palm wine. Among the many children in the village was a little girl named Uda. Uda was not like the other children. Her skin was pale like fresh pap, her eyes glowed, and she was unusually small for her age. Even though she was 12, she looked no older than 8. From the moment Uda started school, she became the object of cruel jokes and endless bullying. The other children would call her terrible names: witch, spirit child. At school, Uda sat alone. During break time, while other children played and chased each other around, she would quietly sit under a mango tree, nibbling on the little food her mother packed for her, which was usually cooked yam, but even that peace never lasted. Sometimes the other children would gang up, snatch her food, and throw it into the bush. And when she cried, they would laugh and mimic her tiny voice. Uda, however, never told her mother, not because she didn't want to, but because her mother, a poor widow who sold vegetables in the market, was already weighed down with life's many troubles. "I'm fine, Mama," Uda would always say when asked about school. But things only grew worse. One fateful afternoon, 5 of the most notorious kids in the village, Obum, Obia, Kamsi, Ada and Tochi, approached Uda with wide, toothy grins. "Uda," Obum called, "we've been thinking, maybe we haven't been fair to you." Uda looked up, her strange glowing eyes hopeful for the first time in a long while. "Yes," Kamsi chimed in, "we want to be your friends. Let's meet at the village square this evening. We'll play together." Uda's tiny heart danced with excitement. Could it be? Had they finally changed their hearts? As the evening breeze swept through the village, Uda arrived at the village square. The skies had turned a moody orange, and the crickets had begun their evening songs. She spotted the 5 children gathered near the old tree. Ada, Obia, Kamsi, Tochi, and Obum, the leader and most wicked of them all. At first, Uda smiled faintly, her tiny heart hoping this would be the day she finally had friends. Right in the middle of the square, she noticed a shallow pit, freshly dug in the soft earth. The soil around it was loose, and beside it lay a small shovel and some broken sticks. What is this for?" Uda asked, her voice small but clear. The children exchanged mischievous glances. "It's part of the game," Kamsi said, trying to sound playful. "Jump inside. Let's play hide and seek." Uda stepped back, her glowing eyes narrowing. "No, I don't want to play hide and seek." But before she could finish speaking, Obum with a wicked grin ran forward and shoved her hard into the pit. She screamed and landed with a thud inside the shallow grave. Her tiny hands reached up, trying to climb out. But before she could, the other kids grabbed handfuls of sand and began throwing into the pit. "Stop! Stop, please! I beg you!" Uda cried. "I can't breathe!" Tochi, one of the girls in the group, suddenly felt uneasy. Her hands shook and tears filled her eyes. "Please, let's stop! Please! We'll get into trouble!" she pleaded, her voice cracking. But the others ignored her. Obum and Obia laughed, flinging more sand. "Let's bury the witch! Let's bury the ghost girl!" they chanted. Uda struggled weakly, coughing and sobbing, and then with her final breath, she pushed an arm through the sand, but Obum pushed it back down and continued to pour sand, all the while laughing. A sudden cold wind blew through the square, rustling the leaves of the old tree. The children froze for a moment, But then Obum laughed it off. Let's cover it up and go home. Within minutes, the pit was filled. They placed a flat stone over it, stomped the earth down, and ran off into the night, leaving the square silent once more. Mama Uda was at the back of her small mud house, peeling yam for dinner, while the sun began to set. Uda, as usual, had come home from school, dropped her worn-out sandals at the door, and rushed inside to grab a calabash of water. She was unusually quiet that day. Mama, I'll be back. I'm going to the square. Tochi and the others said they want to play with me. Mama Uda looked up from her yam and smiled softly. For the first time in a long while, she felt relief. Maybe, just maybe, the other children had decided to accept her little Uda. Don't stay too long, eh? Night is coming, oh, and stay away from that big Udala tree. Uda nodded, her tiny feet pattering away, the glow in her unusual eyes catching the evening light. That was the last time Mama Uda saw her. As dusk settled and other children began returning home with dusty feet and sweat-streaked faces, Mama Uda noticed something. Uda hadn't come back. At first, she assumed maybe the game had gone on longer than usual. But as the sky darkened, a strange uneasiness began to crawl under her skin. She left her cooking and stepped outside, calling into the wind. Uda! Uda! Where are you? It's time to come home, oh! She called again and again, but nothing. She tied her faded wrapper tightly around her waist and began moving from compound to compound. Tochi, have you seen Uda? Tochi's mother shook her head. No, she didn't pass here. She went to Obum's house. Obum, kedu Uda? Akaramfuya, he lied through his teeth. One by one, she asked. One by one, the children and their parents said they haven't seen Uda. She never came to the square. Mama Uda's voice cracked. Her legs shook. She ran to the village square herself. It was empty, the moon peeking through the trees and the chirping of crickets the only sound. No sign of Uda. She went to the stream, to the market, to the Udala tree, to the bush path. Nothing. By midnight, she had alerted the elders. By dawn, a search party was formed, but Uda had vanished. Mama Uda refused to sleep. She sat by the fire, clutching Uda's old wrapper, calling her name into the night. The villagers began to talk. They said Uda had been taken by forest spirits. But deep down, Mama Uda knew it wasn't the forest spirits. She knew something terrible had happened to her child. The Eze had sent men to search the bushes, streams and pathways for days, but they found nothing. It was as though Uda had vanished into thin air. Slowly, people began to forget about the missing little girl. They concluded she must have been taken by the forest spirits and urged Mama Uda to forget about her daughter. But how do you forget your child? Weeks had passed since Uda went missing. Normalcy had returned to the community. Then one night, while Kamsi lay in bed, she heard scratching at her window. At first, she thought it was just the wind, but then the scratching grew louder. It wasn't the sound of a stick or a bird. It was deliberate, like long fingernails scraping against the wood. Her heart pounded. She sat up in bed and called out to her mother, "Mama! Mama! Something is outside my window." But when her mother came in and checked, there was nothing there. "It's just your imagination," her mother said, annoyed. "Sleep, Kamsi." But Kamsi knew what she heard. And as her mother left the room, the scratching continued. She didn't sleep that night. One afternoon, while playing football near the bush path, the ball rolled into the nearby shrubs. Obia ran to fetch it. As he reached down to grab the ball, he felt a cold hand grip his ankle. He screamed and jumped back. But then when he looked, nothing was there, just the grass swaying gently in the breeze. He ran home in terror, abandoning the ball. Tochi had been having the same nightmare over and over. In her dream, she was walking alone through the village at night, and from the shadows, a small figure with glowy eyes would appear. Tochi, Tochi, the voice would whisper. She would wake up, sweating and screaming. Her mother took her to the herbalist, but nothing worked. Each night, the dreams came, and each time, the glowing eyes came closer. As life moved on, one person in the entire village was walking around with a heart so heavy, it felt like it would burst. Uda's mother. Since the day her little girl left for the village square and never returned, Mama Uda hadn't known peace. Every morning she would walk barefoot down the dusty path, calling her name. Uda, Uda, my daughter, please come home. At night she would sit outside by the fire, her eyes red and swollen from crying, watching the bush path, hoping, praying that somehow her child would appear with that tiny frame and glowing eyes she used to worry about. Some of the villagers talked behind her back. Maybe the spirits took her. Mama Uda should just forget and move on. But how does a woman forget her child? Tochi's mother noticed her daughter shrinking away, avoiding meals, jumping at every sound. One night, as thunder rumbled in the distance and the wind howled through the trees, Tochi burst into tears. Mama, Mama, I want to tell you something, she cried. Ogini, what is it, my child? Tochi confessed everything. How they lured Uda to the square, how they made her jump into the shallow pit, how Obum pushed her when she refused, how they buried her alive. By the time Tochi finished, her mother was trembling, with tears running down her cheeks. She couldn't believe it. Chukwaju, what have you children done? By morning, Mama Tochi went straight to the palace of the king. She fell to her knees in front of the elders and told them what her daughter had confessed. The Eze's face turned dark. The elders sat in heavy silence. This was beyond the ordinary. Go and bring all the children involved, Eze commanded his guards. But before this happened, Obum, the leader of the wicked act, had also confessed to his own mother days before. His mother, a proud and fearful woman, slapped him twice the moment he opened his mouth. I forbid you from speaking of this again, she hissed. You want to bring a curse upon this family? Are you mad? She made him swear before the gods of their land never to repeat it to anyone. She sealed his lips with threats. And so, while Tochi's mother ran to the Eze to reveal the truth, Mama Obum sat in her compound with a guilty heart. She knew what her son did was wrong, but he was just a child. Nobody knew the truth. Besides, everyone had moved on. It was better to let sleeping dogs lie. No one has to know ever, she concluded. The entire community gathered under the ancient Iroko tree in front of the Eze's palace. With tension in the air, what could be the problem? The people murmured. Mama Uda, with swollen eyes and trembling hands, clutched her wrapper tightly. She stood alone, eyes darting around for any sign of her precious Uda. The children sat silently, their faces pale with fear. Tochi could barely keep her eyes up. Obum avoided everyone's gaze, while his mother wore a stiff, stony face as though nothing concerned her. Eze, an elderly man, sat on his wooden throne, surrounded by the village elders. Tochi, he called out, his voice heavy and deep. Repeat exactly what you told your mother, here before your elders and your God. Tears poured freely from Tochi's eyes as she knelt in the center of the gathering, her voice trembling. It was Obum's idea. We told Uda to meet us at the square. We said we wanted to be her friend. When she came, they pushed her into a pit. Obum, Obia, and the rest buried her alive. I begged them to stop. I begged and begged, but they wouldn't listen. A deafening silence fell over the crowd. Then a blood-curdling scream broke the silence. Chuku! It was Mama Uda. She fell to the ground wailing, rolling on the dust, tearing at her wrapper. They have killed my child. They have killed my Uda, my only child. May your hands never know peace. May your generations pay for this blood you shed today. She wept so bitterly the earth itself seemed to mourn with her. The parents were struck, dumb with shock, unable to believe the wickedness their children had done. Except for Mama Obum, of course. She clutched her handbag tightly, refusing to show emotion. One of the elders rose to his feet. Mama Obum, did your son tell you what he did? The mother kept quiet and said nothing. The elders took her silence to mean yes. Why did you not speak up? Why did you shield such evil? Mama Obum stubbornly lifted her chin. I only did what any mother would do to protect their child. The entire square shouted, Hey, Mwanya, you are a very wicked woman, the villagers said as they pointed at her. The elders were enraged. Your punishment will be severe. The Eze thundered, You will answer for his cover-up, for aiding wickedness. No one in this land will shelter evil under their roof and go unpunished. Then the Eze turned to the youths. Gather your hoes and shovels. You will dig out the grave right now. The spirit of that innocent girl must be brought home to rest. The young men of the village took up their shirts and grabbed their tools. Mama Uda, still sobbing, was supported by the women as the crowd began marching toward the village square where the shallow grave lay. When the youths reached the site, they dug and dug, but the grave was empty. What could have happened to Uda, they all wondered. After the children buried Uda in that shallow pit, they left without a second thought, laughing nervously and trying to act like nothing happened. Evening came and the square was deserted, save for the sound of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl. In the evening of the next day, a middle-aged trader from another village was passing through the square on his way home from the market. As he walked by, something caught his eye, a small pale hand sticking out from the soil. He froze. His heart pounded. At first, he thought it was a doll or a piece of stick, but as he moved closer, he saw fingers twitch faintly. Chukwaju, this is a human hand though. He flung his things aside without wasting time and began digging frantically with his bare hands. Within minutes, he uncovered the dusty limp body of little Uda. Her face was covered in dry soil and her tiny body was cold. She wasn't moving. He shouted for help, but none came. He quickly carried her home. When he laid her down, she was unconscious, barely breathing. Sand had gotten into her eyes and throat. His wife gently wiped her face and lips. Uda's eyes were swollen shut, crusted with sand. Her lips were cracked. By the next day, Uda regained consciousness. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. She had no idea where she was or how long she'd been there. The trader and his wife gave her water and food. She struggled to eat and remained weak and couldn't see or talk because of the sand damage in her throat and eyes. Since the child was unknown in their village and couldn't communicate, they took her in, hoping to nurse her back to health. After the youth reported that the grave was empty, the Eze ordered for a search from one village to another until Uda was found. Her mother was consumed by grief, refusing to believe her daughter was dead. She would sit by the door every evening, watching the path, hoping to see her tiny figure coming home. No one had any idea that Uda was alive, just a few villages away. The Eze of Ogboko had refused to fold his hands. He knew too well that in matters like this, time was dangerous. So he gathered some of his trusted elders, able-bodied men and a few of the youths. They formed a search party and began moving from one village to another, asking questions and describing Uda. For days they walked, going from one place to another. Many claimed not to have seen any girl matching the description. When they finally reached Umueze, they went straight to the palace of Eze Nwokoye, the wise and respected king of the land. After hearing the Eze's men, Eze Nwokoye wasted no time. He summoned his town criers and sent them around the entire village, announcing, "If anyone in this village has seen a strange young girl, tiny in size with glowing eyes, report immediately to the palace." Not long after the message went out, Okorie made his way to the palace. When he arrived before the king, he knelt and said, "Your Highness, I am the man who found the little girl buried alive. She has been in my house, and the herbalist has been treating her, but she is not yet well. She has not spoken. She cannot see. She is weak, but alive." The Eze was both relieved and cautious. He called his council and told them, "We cannot release this child to anyone until she is well enough to say who she is and how she came to be in that state. It is the only way to protect her and this land from trouble." The Eze of Umueze then addressed the search party. "Go back to your land and tell your king that a little girl fitting the description has been found here. But until she is strong enough to speak and identify herself, she will remain in our care. We give you our word, no harm will come to her." Though heavy-hearted, the search party had no choice but to return to Ogboko and deliver the message. Back in Ogboko, Mama Uda's heart broke afresh at the news. She wailed and cursed the day those children were born. "I just want to see my daughter, even if it's to bury her properly," she wept. But the Eze promised her, "You will see your daughter again. I swear on my title and my father's grave." It took several days before Uda regained full consciousness. She was carefully fed with soft pap and warm water. The village herbalist treated her swollen eyes with herbs and constant washing. One morning, as Obiageli, the trader's wife, was cleaning her face, Uda moved her lips and managed to whisper faintly, "Mama." Obiageli froze. "What did you say?" Uda tried again. "I want Mama." It was the first time she had spoken since being found. Obiageli quickly called her husband. Uda, though still weak and unable to open her eyes properly, told them her name was Uda from Uboko. When they asked what happened, she couldn't remember how or who put her there. Tears filled Obiageli's eyes as she hugged the frail child. "Don't worry, my daughter. You're safe now." The trader and his wife decided it was time to find her family, so they went to the king. As promised, a few days later, when Uda had regained enough strength and could speak faintly, Eze Nwokoye fulfilled his words. He gathered a small honorable escort. Okorie, the trader who found her, his kind-hearted wife, 3 elders and a few guards. As they walked through the village to the king's palace, villagers saw them and followed behind, singing and jubilating. Mama Uda broke through the crowd. Her wrapper was half-tied, her hair unkept, tears streaming freely down her cheeks as she ran toward her daughter. "Uda! Uda mo!" she wailed. The guards quickly stopped her at first, as protocol demanded the delegation reach the palace first. But seeing her anguish, the Eze's men waved her through. Mama Uda fell on her knees beside her daughter, holding her frail hands, weeping and calling her name over and over. Uda's lips quivered. In a faint, cracked voice, she whispered, "Mama." The villagers watching were moved to tears. The entire procession moved to the palace square, where Eze Owakwe awaited with his council. Once they arrived, the elders of Umueze handed Uda over formally to the Eze of Uboko, recounting how she was found and cared for. A hush fell over the village as Eze Owakwe stood and declared, "Today we have seen the mercy of the gods. Let every parent hold their child close, and every child remember that evil may hide, but it cannot escape forever." He thanked the Eze of Umueze for keeping his promise and also appreciated the trader and his wife. He then ordered that Uda be taken into his own compound to be fed and cared for until she was strong enough to recount what happened to her. Days after Uda's safe return to Uboko, the village was still in shock. Though she was alive, she wasn't the same little girl they had known. Uda could barely remember anything about that terrible day. The trauma had left her with partial amnesia. Some things she recalled faintly: her mother's face, her home, the sound of the stream behind their house. But when it came to the events at the village square, her mind was blank. The healer explained to the Eze and the elders that it was not uncommon for the mind to suppress memories too painful to bear. And when asked if she remembered who took her there, or what happened before she woke up in a strange land, Uda would frown, hold her head, and say softly, "I don't know." Eze Owakwe sat quietly for a long time in his chamber before calling his elders. Then he said, "Perhaps it is a blessing from the gods. No child should carry such memories. If the gods have spared her from the weight of it, we must not force it back into her heart." The elders agreed, but judgment still had to be served. Tochi's confession remained clear and detailed. The names of those involved had been spoken. The grave had been found. The evidence of what happened was undeniable. And so, on a solemn morning, the Eze gathered the entire village, the families of those involved, and Mama Uda at the palace square. Before the eyes of all, he declared, "The 5 children, Obum, Kamsi, Obia, Ada, and Tochi, would be taken to the ancestral shrine for cleansing rites. For though Uda might not remember, the land would, and justice must be done. Their families would be ostracized for a period of 5 years. No one was to buy or sell to them. They were not to fetch water from the same stream, nor share in community festivals or meetings. Obum's family, for covering up the crime and showing no remorse, would be banished from the land. They were given 7 market days to gather their belongings and leave Oboko forever." The Eze raised his staff and spoke, "Let this judgment bring peace to Uda's soul, whether she remembers or not. Let every parent in Oboko learn that evil thrives when children are left unchecked. This land must never see such darkness again." The people chorused in unison, "Ise." Mama Uda wept, but this time there was comfort in her tears. Her child was home, alive and well, and spared the weight of those memories. The village would heal, and the story of what happened to Uda became a lesson, not of hatred, but of forgiveness, vigilance, and the consequences of silence. And from that day on, no child in Oboko was ever left to suffer alone again. I hope you learned a lesson or two from this story. Let us know your take on the story in the comments. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please subscribe. Thank you so much for your encouragement, and please always remember to like the video. It helps this channel to grow. I'll see you in my next story. Bye.